Breaking news from around your world on this Monday, July 1st, 2019. I'm Larry Rice. Hong Kong police fired tear gas to try to disperse protesters who stormed the legislature Monday. Police arrived by bus and ran into position as about 1,000 protesters gathered around the Legislative Council building in the heart of the former British colony's financial district. Protesters swarmed into the legislature's main building Monday night, breaking windows, tearing down portraits of legislative leaders, and spray painting pro-democracy slogans on the walls of the main chamber. The sharp escalation in tactics came on the anniversary of the former British colony's return to China, a city holiday, and reflected mounting frustration with Hong Kong's leader for not responding to protesters' demands after several weeks of demonstrations. Plumes of smoke billowed across major thoroughfares and in between some of the world's tallest skyscrapers. Hong Kong has been racked by weeks of protests over a government attempt to change extradition laws to allow suspects to be sent to China to face trial. The proposed legislation, on which debate has been suspended indefinitely, increased fears of eroding freedoms in the territory which Britain returned to China on July 1st, 1997. Protesters want the bills formally withdrawn and Hong Kong's embattled leader, Carrie Lam, to resign. Iran announced Monday it had amassed more low-enriched uranium than permitted under its 2015 deal with major powers, its first major step in violation of the deal since the United States pulled out of it more than a year ago. The UN nuclear watchdog, the International Atomic Energy Agency, confirmed in Vienna that Tehran had breached the limit. The step could have far-reaching consequences for diplomacy at a time when European countries are trying to pull the United States and Iran back from the brink of war less than 2 weeks after Washington aborted airstrikes at the last minute. The Europeans, who opposed last year's decision by President Donald Trump to abandon the nuclear deal signed under his predecessor, Barack Obama, had pleaded with Iran to keep within its parameters. Iran had said it aims to do so, but cannot do so indefinitely, as long as sanctions imposed by Trump have deprived it of the benefits it was meant to receive in return for accepting curbs on its nuclear program under the deal. The move is a test of European diplomacy after French, British, and German officials had promised a strong diplomatic response if Iran fundamentally breached the deal. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said the European countries should stand behind their commitments and impose automatic sanctions on Iran. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un and President Trump agreed at their meeting on Sunday to push forward dialogue for making a new breakthrough in the denuclearization of the Korean peninsula. Trump became the first sitting U.S. president to set foot in North Korea when he met Kim in the demilitarized zone between the two Koreas and agreed to resume stalled nuclear talks. The meeting, initiated by a tweet by Trump that Kim said took him by surprise, displayed the rapport between the two, but analysts said they were no closer to narrowing the gap between their positions since they walked away from their summit in February in Vietnam. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo told reporters shortly before departing South Korea that a new round of talks would likely happen sometime in July, and the North's negotiators would be foreign ministry diplomats. China welcomed the meeting, with a foreign ministry spokesman describing it as constructive and achieving positive results. Trump's national security advisor, John Bolton, dismissed a report in the New York Times on Monday that Washington is seeking to soften its approach, floating an idea of accepting a nuclear freeze instead of complete dismantlement and giving tacit recognition that North Korea is a nuclear state. U.S. stock futures made strong gains on Monday after the U.S. and China agreed to refrain from imposing any new tariffs on each other's products as they try to jumpstart talks on ending their trade war. Futures for the Dow Jones Industrial Average and the S&P 500 were both up by about 1%, while those of the NASDAQ rose by 1.7%. The pledges came at a meeting between President Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping at the Group of 20 summit in Osaka, Japan on Saturday. Trump said the two countries are right back on track, adding that the U.S. would ease restrictions on U.S. firms selling products to Chinese telecommunications giant Huawei. A Moscow court jailed Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny for 10 days Monday after finding him guilty of breaking the law when he took part in a street demonstration last month. The Kremlin critic was among more than 500 protesters detained by police while rallying in Moscow to call for the punishment of police officers involved in the alleged framing of a journalist. The protest came after police abruptly dropped drug charges against investigative journalist Ivan Golunov, a rare U-turn by the authorities in the face of anger from his supporters who said he was targeted for his reporting. Authorities had hoped freeing Golunov and promising punishment for those who allegedly framed him would appease his supporters, but they decided to go ahead with a protest nonetheless. Navalny, Russia's most prominent opposition figure, has served several stints in jail in recent years for organizing anti-government demonstrations. The European Court of Human Rights in November ruled that Russia's repeated arrests and detention of Navalny in 2012 and 2014 were politically motivated and breached his human rights, a ruling Moscow called questionable. A group of pro-European Union lawmakers failed Monday in their latest bid to prevent Britain from leaving the bloc without an exit deal after Parliament's Speaker did not choose their proposal to be put to a vote. Both candidates to replace Theresa May as Prime Minister have said they would oversee a no-deal Brexit if forced to. Boris Johnson has pledged to leave the EU with or without a deal October 31st if he wins, while his rival Jeremy Hunt said that he would, if absolutely necessary, go for a no-deal Brexit. The amendment had sought to deny funds to certain government departments unless Parliament ratified a deal or withdrawal agreement with the EU, or lawmakers have agreed to Britain leaving without a deal. It was the latest attempt by lawmakers to try to prevent Britain leaving the EU without a deal. Last month, lawmakers defeated an attempt by Labour to try to seize control of the parliamentary agenda from the government in order to introduce legislation aimed at blocking a no-deal exit. Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador said Monday he would like to disband the army and put national security into the hands of the new National Guard militarized police force, though he recognized the proposal was unlikely to happen. In an interview with Mexican newspaper La Jornada, the leftist president said he favored guaranteeing the nation's security through the National Guard, which he formally inaugurated on Sunday. Only a few countries in the world have abolished standing armies, among them the Latin American nations of Costa Rica and Panama. Mexico's army has traditionally kept on the sidelines of international conflict, but has been deployed to tackle drug gangs since 2007. The creation of the National Guard, which launched with 70,000 members and which López Obrador intends to grow to 150,000 across Mexico, has raised concerns about the militarization of law enforcement in Mexico. López Obrador has already tapped the force, which was created by a constitutional change, to patrol the country's northern and southern borders in response to President Trump's demands that Mexico do more to contain migrant flows. Nearly 36 people were killed in Kashmir's Kishtwar district Monday when a bus crashed into a gorge. Officials said 52 passengers were on the 28-seat bus when it ran off the roadway and into the gorge. At least 35 died and more than a dozen were injured. They were flown to a hospital in Jammu. The accident was one of a string of deadly accidents in Kashmir that involved an overcrowded or speeding vehicle and poor road conditions. 11 students died last week when a bus rolled into a gorge in Pir Ki Gali. A small airplane crashed into a hangar at a Texas airport north of Dallas while it was trying to take off Sunday, killing all 10 people on board. Moments after takeoff, the twin-engine Beechcraft King Air veered left, dropped its left wing, and slammed into the hangar. A fire department spokesman said the hangar at Addison Municipal Airport was left charred, but there was nobody inside at the time of the crash. Federal Aviation Administration investigators arrived at the crash site Sunday, and an investigation team from the National Transportation Safety Board arrived Monday. China has completed its new mega airport in Beijing after 4 years of construction, 3 months ahead of its planned grand opening. Main building work officially ended on schedule Sunday. Measuring at more than 1 million square meters, the Beijing Daxing International Airport will be the world's largest airport terminal, according to Xinhua News. The airport, resembling a massive shining starfish, was billed as the Golden Phoenix and was designed by late British-Iraqi architect Zaha Hadid. Underneath the terminal is a train station and metro line that will allow travelers to reach the city center in 20 minutes. Located 46 kilometers south of Tiananmen Square, the new airport will operate at full capacity in 2025 with 4 runways and the potential to receive 72 million passengers per year. The $11.4 billion facility now enters its final preparations and will be inaugurated on September 30th. And that's your update for this Monday, July 1st, 2019. I'm Larry Rice. Thanks so much for listening, and I hope you have a wonderful week.